Welcome back to Pixel Project Radio, the video game discussions podcast where we do deep dives and analyze all of our favorite games and some of yours too. It's been a while since I've recorded. We had to take a little break. It's the first recording back. You look great. I look the same. My name is Rick, of course. That was my derivative Marin impression. Now that his show's ending, someone's got to pick it up, right? Today we are talking all about Gris, an artistic platformer. Well, we'll get into it. We'll talk all about it. Before we do, I have to thank the patrons up top. It is them that keeps this train moving, and I appreciate them very much. If you would like to be like these fine folks, you can head on over to patreon.com/pixelprojectradio and support your favorite indie creator, which is me. Of course it is. Or maybe it's not. That's fine too. I have a first-time guest on the show today, which is very exciting. From the 1 Hour, One Decision podcast, half of that duo, we've got Chris joining me today. Chris, thanks for coming by. How's it going?
Hey, thanks so much for having me on. Yes, first-time guest, long-time listener. I really appreciate your podcast and all the deep dives and stuff that you do, as my simple brain sometimes cannot get to those the dots that you connect on these games. So I always appreciate you kind of taking the time to break down all these games. So excited to be here. Hopefully won't bog down the conversation too much, but let's do this.
No. You're not going to bog anything down. I get all the bad takes out of the way and cut that out in editing. So nobody is any the wiser.
Fair enough.
So we're talking Gris today, which is a game that I had never played before, and I'm very excited to talk about. I played it for the first time for this show. What about you, Chris? What's your history with Gris? Did you play this when it first came out?
No, I did not. Actually, a friend of mine, long time, Larry from World 1-1 podcast, told me about this game many times. And I and Tom got to play it for our show, episode 157, and talk about it and play. We played the first hour of it, and spoiler, I kept playing the game and wanted to, just because it was short, but at the same time pretty compelling to keep going. So I definitely finished this game. So I do know how it ends. Maybe not the full ending, but I do know how it ends. And so I'm excited to get into this game and hear your thoughts as well.
Listeners will learn more about your show toward the end when we talk more about 1 Hour, One Decision. But I'm assuming since you played beyond the 1 hour that you and Tom cover on the show, I'm guessing that you really like this game?
Yeah, I had a good time playing this game. It was almost like a cozy platformer.
Sure. Cozy is certainly one word you could use to describe this.
In a way. Like, I mean, what I mean to say, yes, there are definitely themes, difficult themes that are kind of talked about or described in this game or hinted at in this game. Mm-hmm. But what I mean to say is, like, it is not punishing like a Celeste or a Super Meat Boy or something like that, like that kind of platformer.
Sure.
So that's what I mean by cozy.
Sure.
You can't die. You can't die in this game.
We'll talk. Well, some interpretations say you may already have. We'll talk more about the platforming elements, I think, as we go on. I'm with you. I also really like this game. I liked it more than I thought I would. There are some things that I wish it didn't do, but those are so minor. I think this is a very effective work. And I don't really know where else to put this. I put this in the notes. I'm not sure where else I could put this, so I just threw it up top. I appreciate how descriptive this is and not prescriptive. Meaning there is not the plot of this is not the point of this, right? Something that I've been talking about on the show recently is the difference between the plot and the story. And honestly, unlikely as it may seem, Video Game Donkey is kind of the one that got me to start thinking about this, the plot is what happens in the story, but the story is what you experience going through it. And the plot of this isn't the point. To that end, listeners, we usually say that we don't give spoilers before we start talking about the story, capital T, capital S. We're still going to do that. We're not going to reveal any of the secrets, but I will say One, I think the preamble discussion will be a little shorter because of that. But two, even if you do know exactly what happens in this game, even if you know exactly what the reads of this are, I think it won't spoil it for you. It's not... An auditory medium can only go so far, and it will not take away from playing this for the first time and experiencing it auditorily and visually. That will still be your primary experience, and it will still be effective even if you know exactly what this game is trying to do.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned the plot versus a story. Tom and I always talk about, and I think this game does a good job of it. It might be a similar way of describing it, but like I feel like this game does a good job of doing show and don't tell.
Absolutely.
Where you're really like, there's no exposition at all. And so you have to kind of figure out what the heck is going on. Why is all this stuff happening? And then like, we'll talk about it as we get to the spoiler part, but like, yeah, there's just a lot of things where like, oh, now I got it. And it made sense after the fact. But
the interpretation is a big part of this. And in some ways, it is the most important part of this is the interpretation. It's sort of like, like our Beethoven or a Rachmaninoff symphony. You get different things the more you play them. Yeah. To that end, I wanted to preface our discussion with this idea of pure art. I read that phrase a few times this week when I was reading essays and blogs and stuff like that. Pure art. There is no such thing, I think. When we say pure art, something is pure art. This game, Gris, is pure art. What we are really saying, what we mean by the words that we are saying, is that this game is fantastic. This is art of the highest caliber, right? When we say pure art, we are saying art distilled to its highest degree. But what pure art implies is that there is art that is impure, or that there is some sort of standardization that we can apply to this, and that simply is not so. We are always viewing and creating through ideologies, through biases, and through our own lenses. There is us in everything we create, and there is we behind every set of eyes through which we view it. But paradoxically, this is precisely what brings us closer to that idealistic notion of pure art, of art that can resonate in so many different ways to so many different people, such that it transcends to some fantastic importance. And it all rises out of being human and being messy and the baggage and troubles that come with that. That is what this game is about. It is about viewing what is presented to you and bringing yourself to it. To that end, the narrative, the plot of Gris is not the important thing. There are things that happen, and we will get into that, but that's not the important thing. I want to shout out one of my favorite current YouTubers, Robin Walden, who I picked this phrase up from. Interpretation is a co-creation between the author and the interpreter. Interpretation is a co-creation between the author and the interpreter. And that is what Gris is about. And honestly, Chris, and I don't mean, oh my God, listeners are probably laughing because once again, I'm going off on a tangent in front of the guest and not letting you speak. But that is why I'm so passionate and ardent about saying there is no right way to critique something. There is no right way to interpret a book or to interpret a symphony. Death of the author, back to that, who was it? Roland Barnes, I think, who said that. There's a great article on Medium about Gris and Death of the Author by Max Goldstein. But this idea that we co-create with the creator, the author, as interpreters, to create this new thing. And that's why every analyzation and every essay is unique and special. People don't come to my show because they're looking for the objective take or the right take. They come to hear what I'm creating with my guest and with the author of the work that we're talking about. That all coalesces into something special and beautiful and new and human. And that is the point of all of this. There is no right way to interpret Gris. And anybody that comes to my show looking for that is sorely mistaken. You're not going to get it. You're going to get my lens and my biases. And that's part of what makes this process also beautiful.
Yeah. And I mean, you touched on a lot of points right now. And the thing
I
that
went on and on
I
and
find,
on and on.
No, not like that. I'm not. There was no shade to that at all. But what I mean to say is, like, you mentioned how there is no pure art, and like it's interesting when you think about that, because yeah, like everything has some sort of influence. Like you're influenced in some way, shape, or form by some life moment or something that's really inspired you, right? That's we can't, like, we could literally go back all the way to when the cavemen were scratching stuff on the walls, and maybe then we could say that's pure art if you really wanted to go that far. But like the thing that I really what resonated with what you were saying right now is, like, you are forming this opinion, and like I think the reason why a lot of people listen to your show is they appreciate your perspective, that your perspective aligns with what they're thinking as well too. I think, and unfortunately, we're at this time in human history where we are kind of doing that, where people are just trying to find like-minded individuals, and without that, the problem with that, of course, is you've built your own echo chamber, right? And that I mean, like this game, I'll be honest, like this is a game I was actually avoiding playing for a while, because I was like, this doesn't seem like a game that I would necessarily play. And because of that, you know, it's important to have that kind of perspective, understand where that is, and like I think, going back to the whole pure art thing, I think there is still a way for things to be pure art, because if you really put your soul, your personality into something, I feel like that's what really resonates with a lot of people. And that's what I feel like you can have these conversations, whether it's good or bad. I think that's important with a discussion with art, whether it's pure art or not. But like, I think that's like what you want to be able to get out of it as an artist as well.
When the creators of Gris put their full selves into their work, into Gris, then we become the next slot in the relay. It becomes our responsibility to pick it up, put our whole selves into this interpretation, this analysis, and this analysis, and create something new and beautiful. Yeah, man, that's well said. I couldn't agree more. This is where the community forum would usually go. Surprisingly, there was none. Nobody submitted. For listeners that may be new, first of all, welcome. Glad that you're here. The community forum is a channel in the Discord server where I post what we're talking about and give everybody an opportunity to weigh in with their thoughts, critiques, feelings, whatever. Nobody submitted for Gris. That's okay. That happens. And Chris, in all honesty, I'll share with you, I didn't want to play this either. I almost reached out to you to cancel. Okay. I won't get into it. There was a death in my family, and I had a moment. I had a moment where I wasn't sure if I would be able to get through this.
Okay.
But you know, it worked out. And we'll talk more about it. That's part of why, you know, this game is not prescriptive. It's not strictly about the loss of somebody, which is part of what makes this so effective. But let's talk Gris. What is Gris? Gris is a platformer that explores grief, loss, and the acceptance found within that process. It was released in December of 2018 for PC and Switch, came to PS4 shortly after in November of 2019, and then came to the contemporary systems, PS5, Xbox, and Xbox Series in December of 2022. You can find the full credits on the IMDb, on the wiki, or you could beat the game and watch the credits. But of note, this was developed by Nomada Studio, published by Devolver Digital. They put out some good stuff. Directed by Conrad Rosette, or is it Rose? I'm not sure.
European. go with the fancier way of saying it.
R-O-S-E-T. Produced by Roger Mendoza. Art also by Conrad Rose. Composed by Berlinist. Berlinist is a sort of moniker for a group of folks, sometimes going under a solo work. They describe themselves on their website as a music band and a producer based in Barcelona who have been producing original music for digital apps, art exhibitions, and video games. They've done some other games like Neva, which was the follow-up to this, I'm pretty sure, and Wordless, and other non-game projects like Now Remember, a small project called Wowster, I think Sounds for Opera GX, the gaming browser that's kind of just spyware.
Okay.
Yeah, don't use Opera, folks.
All right.
That's kind of what this game is. Let's talk about what's under the hood. Let's start with the mechanics. This will be a light section. Yeah. It is a platformer, but a key design philosophy, at least as it seems to me, is to never let the physical mechanics impede the philosophical mechanics, which is to say, discovery and exploration are far more important than the physical platforming skills. And I like that you had mentioned Super Meat Boy before, Chris, because this is kind of the anti-Super Meat Boy, right? Super Meat Boy is not really, it doesn't have much to say in terms of the human condition. You just have to be really good at platforming. This is kind of the opposite. You don't need to be really good. It wants you to think about the larger implications of what the work is trying to say to you.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I would say for the most part, they did a good job. There were, like, I guess you want to call it platforming puzzles near closer to the end of the game that I felt like I got frustrated, like especially like during when you're like the flower section where you get that ability and stuff like that.
Oh, sure.
Where I was like, what the heck is going on? But yeah, I agree. Like there wasn't a moment where there is no fail state. It is just like allowing you to discover the world, like what is going on. And this does a pretty good job of environmental storytelling, I would say. Yeah,
I think you said it best earlier. It says what it wants to say through showing rather than telling.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the reasons that I like this so much. I don't know if you've noticed this same trend, but it seems to me with video games, there is a tendency to over-explain, to really hammer the point home with every bit of lore and dialogue. For example, I'm playing Death Stranding right now. And look, I like a lot of what they're doing, but some of this dialogue is literally Kojima and his team saying, "Are you catching what we're putting down? Hey, did you notice this? Aren't we clever?"
It's just like he's elbowing you.
Hey, check this out. Yeah, strand. It's kind of like a rope, huh? But it can also mean stranded, huh? Oh my gosh, I was laughing during that scene. It was so ridiculous.
I feel like he just fell off after Metal Gear Solid 3. I know it's a hot take, but whatever. But like, I do appreciate, I did play the game a little bit. I actually liked the walking mechanic. I thought that was actually pretty cool. It was just his obsession with, and again, I'm going off a tangent, but the obsession with cutscenes and like you said, like the over exposition about everything. Like, oh my God, just let me play the game. Let me figure out this world.
Sure.
Like that was it's not a game anymore.
We'll be talking more, folks, about Death Stranding next month. We've got 3 episodes devoted to it. One thing that kind of Gris does similar is the pace of play with Death Stranding is pretty similar. They're both more or less slow paced. I mean, Gris is certainly more so. It's a slow pace of play. The anti-Super Meat Boy, we had also mentioned Celeste. Celeste is kind of an anomaly where it does everything amazingly. It's just a pinnacle of platforming. But
I'll be honest, I haven't played it yet. But yes,
I
from what I've heard, I've heard it's fantastic.
But this one, you don't, if you see this as a platformer, it shouldn't scare you off if you think about things like Super Meat Boy or even Crash Bandicoot. It's not that kind of game. It's very forgiving. You had said, Chris, if you're going to get stuck anywhere, it might be on a few of the puzzles.
Yeah, I agree. And when you were talking about the pace, but the thing that frustrated me the most, it was like a forced slowness. Like there are moments where you literally there have been other games that have done this where it's like, where like even in Uncharted, like where like Nathan Drake gets injured and then like you're just slowly plodding along. It's like, come on, man, just move. Or like God of War 2018. I don't like that game because they do those moments where they have to do the exposition and then Kratos has to slowly walk across whatever it is so that you make sure you get the exposition. It's like, it's that forced kind of hamstringing of you of your character, of your actions is just always like frustrating to me.
I can see what you mean. My counter to that would be, I think if the pace of play of Gris were faster, it would detract a little bit from the overall identity. Like, it would be kind of at odds. Again, Celeste is kind of a special case. It is very fast and it has a lot to say. This though is largely exploring the journey through grief, and I think you could make that a game that is very fast paced. I think it would need to be done in a different visual style, which is what we're talking about next, because the visuals are such a large part of what makes this come to life, and going too quickly through them would really do them a disservice.
But like, I would also counter by saying, could your game design account for that?
Sure.
What I mean to say is, like, make the levels maybe a little bit larger, make them a little bit more vertical. I don't know, like, just something about that where, yeah, you could go at a faster pace, but then just make the world a little bit bigger so that you can still give the opportunity to explore the world as it is. I'm not saying my take is the definitive answer to everything, but I'm like, could there be, is there another version of this game that could be possible where, yeah, you can play this a little bit faster while still thinking about this kind of the themes that are happening there. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, even though I brought up like the Uncharted, like, I'm sure like The Last of Us did, and all other third person games probably have done this in some way, shape, or form. But like, having those moments where you're slowed down, where your character is impaired in some way, I don't know. It's always just like, why? Like, you have that moment to struggle and like you like constantly like mashing your controller to try and make them move. It's like, but it's not going to do anything better. Like, yeah, to your point, like, is that like an artistic thing? Is that the reason? Like, they want you to struggle more to feel that the weight of this situation.
And I think that's the heart of it. It's an artistic decision. Just as just as your analysis and my analysis says more about us as people than it does about Gris, really. Their design choices say a lot about them as creators too. They made the conscious choice to make this a contemplative game in soundscape and visuals and in movement speed. And I think that ultimately says a lot about their own lens through which they're viewing life and their experiences. I agree with you. There's probably a way that they could have upped the pace of play. I mean, especially in certain sections. I personally like it as it is, but I'm not going to tell anybody that they're wrong if they thought this was too slow. You know what I mean?
No, and like, look, I feel like if you really like increase the pace of play, yeah, then maybe this game is not like 3 hours. It's maybe more like maybe an hour and a half, if you're able to cheat the system, so to speak. So I mean, I get it. There are things that I know that they wanted to make sure everyone experienced the same way, and if they needed to slow things down to do that, that's fine. I get it.
We alluded to the contemplative nature of the game through visuals and music, so let's talk about those. Those both play a huge part in Gris.
Yeah.
And visuals, I think Gris's visual language is maybe the most important part of its identity.
Absolutely.
What did you are you a fan of this general art style, this art direction?
Overall, yes. The thing I like freaked me out a little bit was just the way the characters' hands were during gameplay, hands and arms were during gameplay.
Okay.
Anyone that listens to my show knows, like, I don't know why I have an obsession with like first person shooters with looking down and making sure you have feet. This game has feet, but it is kind of weird feet. I'll be honest. It's just like kind of sticks. And then like, it's just like the inconsistency with that, where like when you go to a cutscene, you see she actually has like real arms and real legs. And it's like, wait, what happened to those legs and arms during the game? It's just, I don't know. I obsess over little stupid things like this, and that's my problem. And I will own that, but it's like, that little things like that just do bother me.
It's such a bizarre complaint, and I don't say that to diminish it, and I don't say that to make you feel less for thinking that.
No, it's fine.
It's just
I already know I'm a simple man.
no, not what I meant at all. It's just that would have never been on my radar to even think about, you know?
It's just so weird. I don't know why it bothers me with things like that, but yeah, it is like that was just one thing that I had to make sure I wrote down. Like but it is a beautiful game overall. Like the environments, like, you know, like the cutscenes and everything were just great, and the music just really, I think, hit home the kind of the feeling that you're supposed to have while you play this game. I think everything just did a great job. Like the beginning, like when you're just like, you see this girl kind of like, I guess in a way she does lose her voice in a sense, right? And like it almost kind of has like the Metroidvania, or like yeah, I guess kind of Metroidvania, in the sense that you lose all your abilities and you kind of have to go back and get all your abilities, kind of thing. I don't know if it's necessarily a Metroidvania thing, but like there is that where in a Metroidvania you get abilities and then go back to those areas, which then you can unlock a new thing because you have this ability that you have now, or whatever it is.
Yeah, not quite a Metroidvania. I don't think you do get new abilities. To your point about the way that Gris is styled. Gris, the titular character, whenever you are playing as her on the map, she is stylized. You mainly see her. I don't know if it's a dress or a poncho. I've been thinking of it as a poncho.
Yeah.
It's mainly that, and then you see her head, notably with light teal colored, I think teal-ish colored hair. And then, as you had mentioned, arms and legs are just sort of sticks whenever you're playing as her. The art direction as a whole is watercolor, very watercolor in style, which is something that I always really, really like. I really like the watercolor aesthetic.
And especially as you progress in the game, like the idea that the world starts to get color back into it. Like that's just like, there's been a couple of games that kind of do that, that I can't quite remember, but like at the same time, I feel like I've seen it before, where like you see the color start to come back to the world, and it's like, it's just really cool when you see that. And the colors also, I'm assuming, like also mean different stages of this grief that Gris is going through.
Yeah, to that point, anytime color plays a huge role in a game or in a work of any kind, my immediate thought is to go to color symbolism and think about what these are representing. I think you could maybe make an argument that they work that way here. I'm not convinced by that argument very much. I think the argument that I see passed around a lot is that the colors are representative of the Kubler-Ross model of grieving, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. I find that to be a little juvenile. You know, red is angry and gray is denial. It's like, yes, okay. I mean, that's kind of like a sub 101 thing. I guess what I'm saying is, I don't see that as being really additive to the experience. I don't know that it's wrong. There is no wrong, but I think the larger, more important thing is Gris going through this world and slowly reinvigorating it with color, which, if you think about something like this, the quote unquote stages of grief, or what it means to grieve and feel things like loss and depression, it's often described as a colorless world, a pallid world, a world without vibrancy. And going through this journey with Gris to reinvigorate that slowly, arduously, one at a time, that is the point. It's less about what the colors represent, although you can't argue that. And it's more about reinvigorating that life back into her world. And I think that's beautiful. Absolutely.
I mean, anytime there is loss, like you said, there's that moment of just, you feel this void, and then slowly but surely the idea is that you hopefully get through that grief, and you're not the same person after you get past that, but you try to do the best you can and remember maybe the good times, and remember all the things that person may or may not have taught you, or like have helped you in some way, shape, or form. And like, yeah, I think this was I felt like it was a beautiful way to kind of feel like for someone like this this artist to be able to portray that in this way. So.
Gris as a word, it's Spanish for gray. That is the color gray in Spanish. Also French, but this is a Spanish team, so that's neither here nor there. There was also a Spanish painter named Juan Gris that painted in a cubism style. I'm going to say cards on the table. I consider like physical art, painting and things like that, one of my weakest suits when it comes to, engaging with art. I don't think that I'm particularly good at, talking about it. I don't see any meaningful connection between this game's art style and the art style of Juan Gris. If you were to Google him, you would see that his paintings are very angular and brash, geometric, and bold colors. I have seen other folks saying that this game did take inspiration from Juan Gris, though, and I'm open to being wrong, totally. The stylistic language of Gris, though, it doesn't have that angularity, the brashness, or that quasi-absurd, quasi-avant-garde nature of cubism. Gris makes use of bold colors and geometric patterns, but it lies closer to that opaqueness and that fuzziness of watercolors. It's blended, it's not angular. The colors are at the forefront, not the shapes. It's whimsical and surreal even, not brash and sort of modern. Again, totally open to being wrong. I do not particularly think highly of myself as somebody that can talk about, paintings and such. I'm not very good at that.
I mean, I agree for the most part. I think the only where you would see kind of angular is like there are, I guess, sections or parts of the game where you're like collecting these little, for lack of a better term, like stars or whatever. Yeah. And then when you put them back to their kind of constellations, it is kind of angular there. And there's like some sort of rough or edged shapes that you see throughout. But I agree. Like, I mean, I think for the most part, though, it is, I don't really see how it looks like Juan Gris's artwork overall.
Yeah, it's a cool style. Juan Gris, it's very cool to look at. It's just, it's not that kind of game. It's his style from what I've seen. Again, angularity is the first thing that jumped to my mind, like modern geometricism. This is just not that. It's more blended. It's more opaque. It's got it's very surreal. I mean, there are little creatures in here that add to the surreal feeling. It's, right. I am a big fan of this. This reminds me of like, I'm sure this will mean a lot of things to all listeners, but it reminds me more of like Chopin than something like, I don't know, Mahler or Schoenberg. Yeah. You all know exactly what I mean, right? Everybody listening knows exactly what I mean. Hold
on. Let me just pull up ChatGPT and just check this out.
Yeah. Who is Chopin? Frederick Chopin? Who's that? One visual trick that Celeste, listen to me, that Gris does a lot is it plays with camera and it pans in and out a lot, focusing on the sheer expansiveness of the environment, which I loved. That's maybe my favorite visual trick that they do here. Not that they do a lot of tricks, quote unquote, but they often will pull back the camera to very great lengths to show you sort of, one, how vast this landscape is, and two, maybe suggesting how small you are in it. You know, I think any of us, there's a difference between feeling depressed and being capital D depressed, right? Like having clinical depression and feeling depressed. Those are two different things, which is tricky to talk about. But I think we've all felt depressed at one point in time in our lives, and it can feel like the world around us is just so vast and empty and echoing, and we are just a speck in this huge landscape that does not care about us. And that's how this feels at certain points when it pulls back. One, it can feel very empty, but two, I mean, it can also feel very awe-inspiring. These painted backdrops, not backdrops, but these painted landscapes look so gorgeous and lush once you start getting the color added back in. And it can go from feeling hopeless and empty and isolating to feeling like, you know, kind of awe-inspiring. Like, look at how beautiful these cubes made out of water are. That's so, look at how these lights are lighting up platforms that I couldn't see. This is kind of splendid. And and again, I mean, talking about going through that journey from quote unquote denial to acceptance, you feel that isolation to acceptance, right? And I think the visual, like you had said at the very front, the visual narrative of this, while not exactly prescriptive, it's not, you know, telling a story like a storybook would. It's very suggestive of that journey. And man, I really loved it. I love how this is presented and shot like cinematically.
If I remember correctly from a little bit of research that we Tom and I did about this game, like I feel like the developers found this Conrad Rosette and his art and was like, we need to make a game based on this stuff, and then they were able to like form all this, and they had a vision, and Conrad had this vision to, you could see I feel like every frame you could see that there's a purpose and built around everything. And I agree, like at the beginning, especially when there is no color and when the camera does pan out, you do feel a sense of like hopelessness. You do feel like a sense of like, what else can I do? Like, and especially like when you are plodding around very slowly, and it's just like it's difficult. But then as you get to those areas where there's more green, like the forest areas, and when you have like other characters that you're interacting with, so to speak, and like there is like, you start to feel that sense of hope, and you get all these different ranges of emotion just playing through this game. And it's just very well done overall with that.
Yeah, no, it sure is. I completely agree. Let's talk music and sound. Not a lot of sound in this game, as you might think when we talk about other games. There's no voice acting. There is singing,
right,
but there is no voice acting. There's no voice dialogue. You often hear Gris's footsteps echoing off of the landscapes. Otherwise, not a ton of sound to speak of, but there is a soundtrack by Berlinist, and it's more of a soundscape than anything. It's very sparse, but at times it becomes the motor to a scene's destination and the impact. The music itself is very much, I think, a sort of character, but not one that tries to steal the spotlight and be at the forefront. It very much sits in the background to emphasize the storytelling that's going on. It's the MSG in that way. You don't want to taste it, but it just elevates everything around it.
Yeah, I agree. It was definitely the extra spice, the extra Emerald Lagasse bam that you wanted throughout this game.
Yeah,
where I felt like they just took a lot of caring and feeding. Like I said, every frame, like, okay, this is the moment that we want the music to kick in. Like literally, I feel like they had it down to the second in terms of like making sure you knew this is like a very important moment in this character's life, and what the player should feel as well.
Yeah, and you see that a lot in films, in film scoring and television scoring, where the composer will have to readjust their material to hit different marks, right? You know, you want the wood block to hit when the person knocks on the door, or you want the brass to make a big splat whenever somebody drops their Dagwood sandwich onto the floor. I don't know, something like that. You know what I mean? It feels like that. Everything feels sort of staged, scripted in that way.
Yeah. I mean, like, to your point about how I would say the sound design outside of the music was carefully crafted as well, because again, at the beginning, like you said, you're kind of like walking around in this kind of marble, decrepit world, and then as you bring life to this environment, you have, there's like that forest environment where you hear kind of the ambiance of that environment. And then like it was so cool, like when you're in the water world, where like they cut out the sound and like kind of make things a little muted as you're going through there was just a lot of these little touches throughout the game that like I just really appreciated.
Yeah, they play with silence as much as they do with sound. It works very well. It's very complementary. For as scripted as this feels, I'm wondering if you agree with me here. For as scripted and staged as this feels in terms of how the score interacts with what's going on in the game, everything feels very improvisatory. It feels less like a composition like we think of in the traditional sense, and more like a group improvisation, a sound painting kind of deal. There's no traditional, well, there is in one or two scenes, but there's largely no traditional harmonic structure, no traditional melodic structure or form. It's not like that. It's just soundscapes of piano, synth, and strings that are acting as sort of punctuation marks throughout the score. There's a repeated cell, a swelling of a dyad, a piano pattern, like a Glass or Reich-esque piano cell repeated with tons of reverb because, of course. But it feels like improvisation that's adding commas and semicolons and exclamation points where appropriate, not like a full Uematsu or Shimamoto score.
Yeah, those people. No,
but come on, you know Nobuo Uematsu. Come on, Final Fantasy.
Yeah. I mean, I have him on. I DM him on Twitter all the time. But I agree. Like, I felt like there wasn't a moment where I felt like I felt where in other games I've played where you kind of like pass this gate, so to speak, and then they kick in the music just because you've like passed this threshold. Like, it didn't feel like that. It, like, to your point, it was just like everything felt natural. Everything felt like there was a purpose to it. And you couldn't like break it in a way also, if that makes sense. Like, it was like anything you do, like the game kind of reacted to it in a way. And this was like, granted, obviously we're only playing in a 2D landscape, right? So there's not that much you could break, but at the same time, it was just like, okay, they knew the bounds that you could play around with. And then with that, they took the opportunity to make sure that the music and all the other sounds played with you, as opposed to like waiting for you to do something that then play.
Yeah, precisely so. I think playing with you is a good way to think about it. A reaction-based score is a good way to think about it. It's you're not going to get the depression level theme on the soundtrack. That's just not something that's going to be there, right? That's not World 1, 2, right? You're not going to be seeing that on the soundtrack. That's just not how it works. I think it's really well done. I like that it plays with you in a way to support the scene and to support the overall arc. I don't think, as much as I do like Celeste, we talked about that a little bit earlier, it does have sort of level themes, where you're doing a level for however many times you die, and that soundtrack is going, the whole time. It's songs. You can find that whole fantastic OST on YouTube. This isn't quite like that. It's going to, different sound cues will occur depending on where you are in the level and depending on what you're finding. And that elevates it. I think it works much better that way. It's a little closer to theater in that way, and, all the better for it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this is, for me, it's incredible how much they were able to get across in such a short amount of time. You've got games like like you've got the personas and the metaphors that take 100+ hours of your life to kind of get a story across, and and then this game does it in over a weekend. Like it's incredible what you can do, and like what someone can do in such a in a concentrated form that in like this game.
So we're about ready to start talking about the experience of playing this game. This is typically where we would put in the spoiler wall, etc. Before we give that little jumping off point, there are a couple of discussion points that I have put into my notes here. What I like to do whenever I'm playing a game is I like to read as many contemporary thoughts about it as I can, as well as, contemporary at the time of the game's release, as well as contemporary as in whenever I am existing in that moment. That is to say, I looked up a lot of what folks were saying when this game first came out, and I do not agree with a lot of the way this game was spoken about. So I've kind of condensed it into 3 common points here that I wanted to touch on before folks, maybe jumped off. Again, I don't think this is the kind of game you can spoil, but if you're particularly sensitive to that, the jumping off point will be after we talk about these 3 points. So let's talk about them.
Yeah.
Not a very elegant segue, but whatever.
That's fine.
So the first thing is something that you touched on a little bit earlier at the very beginning. This game is too easy / where's the platforming? I really don't know why we're having this conversation in 2025. It's entirely uninteresting to me. It says nothing.
Yeah.
Games should be fun is simply not the argument that those that use it think it is. I mean, never mind the fact that fun is entirely too subjective to define precisely and clearly. It becomes the Texas sharpshooter fallacy or the moving goalpost fallacy that, well, this isn't fun to me, therefore it fails. Well, what is fun to you? It's a feeling. It's changing for every single thing. This is such a poor metric to judge these games by. And as we said before, if the balance of messaging and gameplay is off for you here, there are no shortage of challenge-centric platformers. Super Meat Boy, Celeste, Crash Bandicoot to a certain extent. Maybe even Spyro, I would say, is a little more challenging platforming-wise than this is. That's coming to this work and expecting it to be something else when that was never in the agreed-upon contract. This is like going to see My Dinner with Andre and saying, I don't get it. Movies are supposed to be fun. Ridiculous. Or listening to like Philip Glass and saying, where's the verse? Where's the chorus? It doesn't make sense.
Or playing Hades and be like, I don't get it. So,
Yeah. Or playing Hades and saying, this is too horny. You're coming to a game expecting it never agreed to not be that.
I still have yet to play a roguelike that I have enjoyed. So just so you're aware. And Hades is also part of that. But I will try them out. I will see hey, is this the one? Is this the one that's going to get me over the hump? I've tried them and I've just not for me. I don't know what it is. But anyway, that's another tangent.
I'm curious. I don't want to speak for you. Is this an argument that resonates with you at all? Like I can say it doesn't resonate at all for me when folks say this game is not fun. This isn't a platformer because it's too easy. Is that an argument that means anything to you? Like I'm happy to get pushback on that, but it simply doesn't work for me.
I think I agree with you. This is something that they, as in the developers Nomada Studio, wanted to put out there. They wanted to make sure that everyone is able to complete this game and see the story to its fruition, right? And there are many ways to do that. And some developers like FromSoft make sure they do it as difficult as possible for people, and they don't put any of those what is it, the bumpers on the side to make sure you're okay.
Sure.
And in this game, they do try to make sure that you're not hindered by the difficulty, because that's not the point of the game. The game's not about being a difficult game, but more about this is the story. This is the kind of journey that Gris goes through, and I want you to be able to complete it. And for that, I tip my hat to them, because that is a lot of times not what people want to do, or what developers or publishers want, right? They want to make sure that they can extract as much money from the people that are buying these games, right? So they want to make sure you can get as many hours as you can from your players, as well as then being able to hawk some sort of garbage DLC after that. And this game just says, this is my story, this is what I'm doing, and that's it.
Sure. Yeah, you've got to meet it where it's at. It never masqueraded as something more.
Yeah. And and to your point also, if you don't like this game, there are a million other platforming games to play. But if you want something that's a little different from that, where there is kind of an emotional story, give this a shot, because it's not a very long game. So it's not going to take you very long to figure out you get to the end of the story. So even if you are going to complain that the game is too easy, at least you had an opportunity to see what this studio is capable of and what the story that they're trying to put out there.
A second common complaint that I saw a lot is that this game is journalist bait. This is an egregious comment to make. This is a broader conversation about the role of a critic and the role of a work, which we talked about that on a previous episode on the show, and I think we're going to do another one. But of course, journalist bait is never clearly defined, so that burden lies with us. We can assume, I think this is what folks mean, that journalist bait is a game that is deliberately provocative in its presentation, mechanics, or storytelling, and uses thematic ideas and subjects that are deemed quote-unquote easy within the current culture. That latter point, these are typically things such as mental health, gender identity, anti-fascism, things that can be derided as being inserted for culture points. Do you know what I mean? I think that is the best way I can steelman that, inserting the DEI in just for the sake of the DEI, that kind of argument that generally has an entirely soggy foundation and doesn't hold any weight with me. But that's when folks say journalist bait, it's things like that. It's an anti-intellectualism argument at its core, which drives me off the fucking wall. Not to mention, just throwing this out there is a convenient way to sidestep engaging what's actually being presented to you. It's the equivalent of like the TikTok comment section where they're like, glazing, or SYBAU, or I hope she reads this, bro. That whole social media is eroding our ability to think. I swear.
Yeah, I mean, because everyone is looking for, even on the YouTube comments or like TikTok comments, they're looking for the likes, right? And their response is like, "Oh, did I say something that's going to be like really interesting to people, or that really resonates with people?" It's like, come on, man, like everyone's just saying things to get the clout, and it is frustrating.
They want the likes, they want the clout, but they don't want to engage in learning about what they're talking about. So they repeat the same little phrases.
Exactly. Or like what I will say this about the Souls in a community. I feel like there was just a few bad actors that had that whole like get good bro thing that from every time that I've streamed a Souls game, the people that have jumped on have been always like very welcoming and very helpful. So like it's just like, it's unfortunate that like a few bad actors have to ruin or spoil a community. And like the same thing with this, where it's like because it's so easy to do it. It's so like, just 3 words, quick blazing blow, or quick glazing bro. And then SYBAU. Do people say that? They say that, or they spell it out? I don't know.
No, they spell it's a self-censorship to say shut your bitch ass up without getting like censored on the platform. That's self-censorship is another whole thing with the online community.
Yeah. I mean, like, I kind of get it, because the comments are section. It's not a place where you can have like this conversation that you and I are having right now, right? You have an opportunity to just say something real quick, a hot clickbait, whatever you want to say, and move on. And then someone will engage with it and then go off the rails because it's like, oh, what the hell, man? Why'd you say that? And like, maybe they want that. Maybe they just want that kind of notoriety. I don't know.
But I think that's the insidious nature of this, right? Is that we already are already crippled insofar as our ability to meaningfully discuss online because of moderation, because of character limits. And now we are using these token phrases to avoid having a meaningful discussion altogether, to just use repeated phrases like we are playing out of the same 52 card deck. And it's eroding any kind of meaningful discussion that we can have on the internet right now. It drives me insane, as you can probably tell.
Maybe a little bit, no, but like, I get it, and like, as the journalists have this opportunity to take a look at a game like this, and they put they're able to go over the 155 character limit or whatever it is that they have on the comment section. It can be frustrating, but like, I don't think that the game was trying to do that. I feel like this was a very personal story that was being shared to the rest of the world. And, kind of going back to the whole art discussion, it's like, they put it out there and let other people decide what they want to decide how to feel about it. And that's a very brave thing to do. I mean, look, even what we're doing right now, we're talking about a game. We're putting our opinions out there right now. And you do this all the time. Like you take this opportunity to go in depth with a lot of games and put out your opinions. And it's like, not many people do that. And like, a lot of people can say, they can sit there and make a complaint, but they're not the ones that are taking the time to do the research and put this stuff out there. So it's like, this is their moment. And for someone to just say that this is journalistic bait is just kind of bullshit. And it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, no, I agree. Just to move us along, I want to get into the game. One last discussion point that folks will call this baby's first metaphor, quote unquote, or the themes were way too obvious. Now, I will fully admit I have been guilty of saying baby's first metaphor before as a sort of reductive way to write something off. I fully admit that. There is a deleterious nested assumption or a presupposition, whatever, within here. And that is that a work's messaging and meaning must be obfuscated in some way or otherwise not immediately graspable, i.e. difficult for it to have value. And, I wonder if the folks that say this, that this is baby's first metaphor, say the same thing about books like Animal Farm or 1984, Moby Dick, The Road, The Great Gatsby, these classics that are very upfront about what they are trying to say. I have a parenthetical that says, "Who am I kidding? These people don't read." But I'm trying not to straw man here. What I think this is, it's this larger point of it's a reflection of an insecurity that people will feel. They will say, "This work didn't give me the feelings of self-satisfaction that I wanted about my intellect, that I decided it should give me before I even finished it, and therefore it fails on my metrics." I don't know what universe an artist being good at delivering and conveying metaphors and imagery becomes a con. I don't know what world that is, and I don't want to be a part of it. And maybe I'm not arguing this particularly well. I think there is such a thing as being too on the nose or being too loud about something. I don't think this even verges close to that. I have a real problem with, I think, this trend that's largely been accelerated because of TikTok, of folks thinking that only the most, how to phrase this, only the most highbrow intellectual, using the most amount of theory and etc. works are the ones that are valuable. I just don't think that is so. I know it's anti-intellectual in some way. I don't have the vocabulary at this time to spin that argument out. And this is not the show for that. I'm already talking more than I should be. I don't think that this argument holds a lot of weight for me. I think the game says what it's trying to say succinctly and with enough clarity, and it does so without prescription is the thing, and that's why it's successful. In fact, there is a secret scene that you can get that adds more clarity that I think in some ways makes the work less effective. I don't know. Maybe I should apologize. I don't know that I argued this very well at all. I don't think that this is a meaningful argument against this game.
No, I agree. Like, I mean, we kind of touched on it with Death Stranding earlier on, but like, I guess there's a acceptable limit to maybe exposition or whatever to be a bit like, or exposition of the theme. I think the problem also is there's so much content out there, right? Whether it's games, music, movies, TV shows, etc. And because we've seen it all, and there's only so many ways a story can be told. It gets harder and harder for someone to obfuscate their theme. And then the fact that someone's going to just berate a game like this because, oh, they're so obvious. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the point. Like, they want you to know that this is about the struggles of someone losing something or someone, and like their journey to get past that, get through it. What's the problem with that? What's the problem with having something to be quote unquote on the nose in that sense? But like, I mean, at the same time, I'll argue that it isn't a game that is so much so like being very ham-fisted about it, where there's dialogue or Kojima sitting there telling you.
Yeah, I was about to say, a strand is like a rope.
But like, it's not doing that. So like, I can appreciate that. And it, like, that's why you don't see as many murder mystery movies and stuff like that anymore. Like, yeah, of course, what's his name? Ryan Johnson does a fantastic job with what he's doing with subverting the expectation, which I think a lot of people are looking for, that like subversion. And it's
Sure.
like, yeah, you can only do it so much.
I think
until it's just the same thing. It becomes formulaic.
I think you're walking beside a really, really good point, Chris, in that there are already so many stories. And at this point in history, we're sort of burdened by choice. We have this overconsumption epidemic where everything is available to us all the time. Right. I mean, made me think of that Bo Burnham section of Inside, a wonderful, wonderful special. We are paralyzed by choice at this point. We have access to everything in history at the drop of a hat, thanks to the internet. And like back before that, there were plenty of stories and art around, but we didn't have the levels of consumption where we could just load it up on YouTube and check it out.
Yeah.
And that access is a double-edged sword in that, it's amazing that we can be exposed to all of this, but the natural consequence then becomes we get sensory overload and thus dulled, desensitized because of all of this consumption. And if we're not careful, that can hinder, I think, how we are wowed and awed and moved by this kind of thing. I think we have to work consciously to not be desensitized in some ways. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, like I feel like I have this discussion with my kids all the time, because I tell them, like, you're growing up in a place in a time period where information is literally at your fingertips. You can find out about anything. But the problem is right now, is that information can be skewed in whatever way that person is giving that information to you with, right? So like, I tell them, like, you always got to make sure you research, like, make sure you have at least 3 sources of where to, like, if this is legit or not, because you can't just find the one right person that might be able to explain it to you with a wink and a smile and be like, oh yeah, this is the right way. Because unfortunately, I feel like that's what's happened with society now, right? Like, a lot of times there are people that are just find that one voice that resonates with them, and then they listen to anything and everything that they say. So it's important to make sure you have the opportunity to, you have all this information, make sure you utilize it in the best way possible, because it's like, it's crazy. It's just, yeah. Before, I still remember the commercials for like the Encyclopedia Britannica and stuff like that.
Oh,
and,
sure.
Like, getting an Encarta CD. Yes, I'm aging myself here, people. But the point is, like, you had to go out, go to the library and find that information. Now you don't have to do any of that. You could literally get all that on your phone if you really had to. You could talk to something and it would give you all that information. But is it always the right information? That's where you need to figure that out. You can't just trust the first thing that you see.
Right. Yeah. There are dangers in this age of information. But I think, something that can help ground us is engaging with works of art, whether it's a game or a novel, whatever, the encyclopedia, maybe. Things that ground us to humanity, something like a shared cycle that we all go through, like grief and loss, is I think it can be difficult to parse and to talk about and to relive, maybe even, but I think it's important.
Yeah. That connection, like even having these kind of discussions is important, because then you can hopefully see other perspectives and live outside of your bubble a little bit, even for that moment, having that discussion. So yeah,
absolutely. So we're going to talk about the gameplay experience, the experience of playing the game through Gris now. If you are particularly sensitive to spoilers, again, now is the time to jump off. I don't think that this game can be spoiled in the traditional sense, but if you're going to jump off, now is the time. We're going to talk about the journey from loss to acceptance through the story of our titular character, Gris. Okay, it's not going to be a beat by beat. It's not really that kind of game. I've got bolded in here just some key points to talk about. Otherwise, I think it's going to be more of a freeform discussion. The game opens with our titular character, Gris. She's singing, only to lose her voice, a part of herself, the most intimate part of our identity, outside of our mind. She loses it. She's standing on this outstretched hand of some statue, and she runs to the statue itself, seeking comfort or protection or some sense of security, but it doesn't work. It's in vain. The statue that we can't fully see yet, it crumbles, and Gris falls. It begins with the loss of the voice, and that's what this game, quote-unquote, is about. Gris is going on a journey to rediscover her voice. If you really wanted to reduce it down, you could say that. Mm-hmm. I really like the combination of the music choice as you're falling here. The falling is like perpetual. It's seemingly never ending. It's spiraling. And the music itself is really loud. It's not abrasive and it's not grotesque. It's like a fanfare, but it is very loud. It's sheets of sound. It borders on oppressive, but it's a jubilant fanfare. It's that sensory, it's near sensory overload that is immediately followed by silence that can kind of make you feel dizzy in the way that you can sort of feel dizzied after a particular loss. You know, that sort of dizziness that comes with, what's the word? Disassociation, I think. I don't know that was explicitly intended, and I very well am probably reading too much into this. I thought it was really effective.
Yeah, I mean, the other part of it I was just thinking about right now is like, could it be almost in a way like mocking? Because she lost the voice, and it's like these outside, this music is just like being like, okay, well, you can't sing, so I guess I'll sing for you, kind of thing, and like dealing with that kind of pressure from the outside, and crumbling in this sense, right? Watching the statue crumble.
It's so interesting that you went to mocking. You know, a theme of this is going to be the co-creation of interpretation and bringing, you know, this analysis exists within and with part of us. And it's interesting that the part of you brought was mocking and not supporting. Wow, that says a lot about Chris.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you know, it is what it is. But yeah, like you could, at least that's how I interpreted that part there. Especially when you were talking about it, it's like it's being loud, it's blanketing, and she's falling. So that's where I was like, that's where my mind went to, where it's just like, okay, well, this is her downfall. This is her getting to her rock bottom.
Yeah,
in this step.
And that's precisely where we fall to. We fall to a sea of Gris, a sea of gray. And it's critical here. Gris will not move until you make the first step. That's something that can sound a little bit crass, but I think I have been obsessively reading about grief lately. And what I've learned is that no two people grieve the same. It's just not there is no singular piece of advice that can apply blanketly to everybody because everybody's so unique and singular. But one thing that I mean has helped me a lot is that first step to accepting what is going on and allowing yourself to make that journey to healing. I think you have to decide to let yourself do that.
Yeah.
And you have to do that here. I don't know. I'm bringing myself and my recent experiences here, but I think that is of critical note. I think that's really important.
Yeah. I mean, especially as the graphics in games have really gotten better, there's the moment of times where, you know, you see a cutscene in a game and it goes right into the world, like where you're just like, oh, I have to start playing now. Like I have to, like this kind of, I feel like it's an interesting take on that. And, you know, really, really insightful in the way that you just described it too, because she did basically, she's crushed by what apparently just happened. And you have to then, you as the player have to push her forward to the next step in like kind of rebuilding herself.
Yeah, precisely so. And you had said what just happened. We should be clear. We know that Gris lost her voice, but again, this whole journey of storytelling is very descriptive. It's not prescriptive. It's not telling you exactly like this is what Gris lost. We're going through the stages of grief. It's not that hand-holdy. It's suggesting a lot of emotions and feelings and paths through this journey, but it's not prescriptive in a way that this is like the correct story. I will say, I mean, the accepted story, and this is largely colored by the secret scene at the end. The accepted story is that Gris lost her mother, and that is what she is mourning through the stages of grief into acceptance. I think that's fine. Again, I think that secret scene takes away a little bit. But we can talk about that later, I suppose. But, you know, I don't know. I think that reading is fine, I guess, if not maybe a touch juvenile. I don't know how you feel about this, Chris. Like, do you feel that the stages of grief, the Kubler-Ross model, you know, the denial, depression, acceptance, bargaining, anger, do you feel that that's a bit overdone at this point? Specifically talking about not grief as a concept, but the 5 stages.
I mean, are we talking about in terms of all forms of media, or we're talking about video games, or
all forms of media, specifically with the 5 stages? It's okay if you don't.
I mean, I'll be honest. I tend to avoid games that talk about grief.
Oh, that's fair.
It's just, it's funny because like it is, obviously it's very prevalent because there are lots of pieces of media that touch on this subject. And I mean, I can't give a definitive answer on that because
no problem.
I can't say for sure that I'd be like, oh yeah, there's too much of that. But to be fair, I tend to avoid that. So I can't, I'm sure you're a better person to maybe say that.
I am, because longtime listeners know I seek out games that make me feel bad.
Okay.
That's like, you know, when I discovered Disco Elysium, I was like, this is it. This is it.
Yeah.
I'm all about it. I love sad games and stories. But I don't know. The Kubler-Ross model of grief, the 5 stages, was, again, my understanding. I'm not an expert, but my understanding is that it was controversial when it came out. Now it's looked at as like maybe colloquially helpful, but no, my understanding is that no scholar takes it seriously as a prescriptive thing. Not everybody experiences all 5 stages, and not everybody experiences them in that same order that they laid them out in. I'll be a little bit vulnerable here and say that I tend to accept loss, move to the acceptance stage fairly easily, which is not to say that I bypass everything else because that's the quote unquote last stage. And it's certainly not to suggest that the feelings are not stingingly present, because they are.
Sure.
It's just that when it comes to the reality of accepting what has happened, I find that I can get there fairly easily, for better or for worse. So it's the five stages things. It's just so strange to me because I don't know. I don't know what I'm trying to say.
I think the 5 stages are just a way for lack of a better term, the simple-minded to understand it.
Or if we want to be polite about it, if we want to be nice about it, it's a convenient shorthand. It's a shorthand that is accepted by society.
There you go. That sounded much better than what I said.
I deal with customers all week. I know how to politen things up.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, it's a shorthand. It's an accepted shorthand that most everyone can relate to, and there's value in that. There are some readings out there that really focus on this. The anger stage is the color red and the winds get angry. Yeah. And the depression stage, you go down into the depths of the ocean. And it's like, that's the kind of analysis that doesn't move me very much because it just feels like, why talk about it? It's so obvious. But at the same time, to refute myself a little bit, everybody has to start somewhere. This is going to be somebody's first exposure to grief-based media, and they don't have what I bring here to my interpretation. Their co-creation doesn't have that knowledge. So it would be unfair to say that they should automatically be where we're at. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Mm-hmm. This is somebody's first grief media. They're going to maybe need to be guided a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, does this kind of go back to the baby's first metaphor kind of thing, but like in a way that's okay too, because grief, like you said, is interpreted and handled by everyone in a different way, and that's okay. Like this is just the way that Nomada wanted to interpret it, or how they wanted to deal with it in this game, and I think that's okay. They made that decision, and we, as people that are able to play this game and give our thoughts, have to take accept what they've given us, and then we do with it what we want. I think it's just does serve its purpose, and I think it does a good job of portraying what they wanted to do in this in the short amount of time.
And it very well could be the case that is their individual journey through the grieving process. They might experience all these stages, and who am I to say no, that's wrong? Nobody, and where do I get off? Moving forward just a little bit, you're going to progress forward through this initial stage. You start collecting those stars that you had mentioned, Chris. More on that in a second. You come upon these ruins that are modeled after the hands of the statue you saw in the beginning. Every time you arrive at these ruins, 3 things occur. 4 things occur? No, 3 things occur. 1, you see more of the statue. 2, you begin to cry. You allow yourself to express your grief. And 3, this expression, this allowance of yourself to feel, brings some color back into the world. This first section brings back the color red, immediately seeping in as a new watercolor in just a gorgeous way. It's introduced. We hear cellos for the first time in a little sort of like mini cello choir. It's just beautiful. As this red seeps in, color begins to seep back into Gris's life. The first steps toward healing.
Yeah, and you said it's a nice moment to see that shift in her character, like where you're like, okay, something's happening. I'm ready to go to that next step, the next quote unquote level. Yeah, this game just really does know when to pick its moments, when to it's it's just crazy. It just does such a good job with all that stuff.
You had mentioned the stars. Do you what are your reads on the stars and how the stars work? Like why do you think they chose stars? Like what's the point? I don't think there's a wrong answer. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me it was more about when you think about stars in just the, I don't know, pop culture or whatever standpoint, it's always something that you look up to, right? Something that it brings hope, because they always say shoot for the stars. and hopefully you land in the moon or whatever nonsense phrases that you use. But
no,
like,
I think that's right on the money. Like there's, we use the stars as a symbol of hope, right? Look to the stars, shoot for the stars, shoot for the moon. Even if you miss, you'll land among the stars,
right. That's the,
in every classroom, in every classroom across America. Or at least, in the before times.
Right.
I think that's part of it. The stars have always been a sort of symbol of hope.
Yeah.
Think back, and this is just me in my recent reading about like Greek mythology. Think about how the Greeks viewed the stars. They represented the constant and heavenly reminders of the old tales, of the didactic and cautionary tales of Greek mythological characters, families of myth, and how they loved and lost. They also gave explanations to how the world worked, like Uranus and Gaia's marriage for the heavens and earth, Persephone's abduction into the underworld, bringing upon springtime. It made sense of their reality, and Gris too is making sense of her reality with the help of the stars, both on her journey through acceptance, using them as a point of hope. We are, Sagan said it, we are made of star stuff, right? I don't think that the stars and astronomy is like the symbol to lock onto in Gris, but as we said, this is co-creation. Part of what I'm bringing to this is my interest in this, and I see humanity in astronomy and the stars, and I think Gris using them as a pinpoint of hope and as a tool for healing and literally ascension towards the end of the game. I don't think it means nothing.
No, absolutely. Like, I think that, like you said, like at the end of the game, you are climbing those stars to move on and to get past this with a different perspective, I would say, because even climbing those stars is not like a straight and narrow path, right? There are just kind of angles and like curves and stuff like that you have to progress to get to where you need to get to. And it's just a nice way to end it. And full disclosure, obviously, since we're talking about the spoiler stuff, I did not get the secret ending. I didn't do all the collectibles. So I was under the impression I did go back and look at the secret ending or like that extra thing. So I had a totally different interpretation of the game. And like, to your point, it does, once when you go find that other part of it, I was like, oh, okay. So it's about the loss of her mother or whatever. And I was like, oh, that's not what I thought at all when playing through the game. So it was interesting to see that.
Well, I think you bring up a good point, is that your read changed once you learned that. And that is why I think that secret scene in some ways detracts from the effectiveness. And it's fine to talk about this here. We're not necessarily going beat by beat in order. If you get to the end without the secret scene, this game is not prescriptive in a way that it makes you think, oh yeah, it's the loss of a family member or even the loss of a human. It is the journey from feeling low to acceptance and healing. That can be, Gris lost her voice. Before I played through the game, something that I thought of was an injury that I had with music that kind of prevents me to this day from being able to play. I lost a part of myself in that way. Oh, wow. That is a sense of loss. Getting to the end, the statue imagery is always there. There's always a statue of a grown woman with Gris. There are multiple ways to look at that. Perhaps Gris herself has passed away and she's seeing what could have been. She's mourning the self that she never got to be. There's also the added, the statues are very clearly female. Perhaps this is a loss of femininity. When we think of femininity, we think, or at least one of the first things I think of is fertility. That could very well be an angle of this that I, quite honestly, I don't particularly want to argue, being, a man that also hasn't really thought about this a ton. It's not my place to make that argument, but that is a reading that I could get behind if somebody wanted to make it.
I get your interpretation of it. Like, whether it's right or wrong, it's just what you felt when you made that.
It's your co-creation, and that's not to say that it's automatically good and valid. You still have to back it up. Right. But but the point is this game is largely about loss and grief and depression too. There's a whole darkness monster we're going to talk about that I think represents what David Foster Wallace, take a shot, I mentioned David Foster Wallace, what he called it in Infinite Jest. But it's just that sort of messy human experience of grieving. And it can be about anything. The secret scene explicitly shows Gris with her mother. And to be fair, in the dev's defense, there's no way you're going to stumble upon this secret scene. You basically have to use a guide to get it. I mean, you have to do so many specific things. I think it'd be extraordinarily unlikely that anybody would stumble upon it. So in that way, sure, like that's fine. If you're going to put that piece of you inside of the game, that's fine. I do think adding that extra little step, though, of saying this is what it's actually about, for me personally, made it a little less effective. I liked it whenever it was more abstract about, here's what we're showing, bring yourself to it. Does this resonate with you when you lost a pet, or, when you lost a family member, or whenever you lost a part of yourself, like maybe, I don't know, your ability to do something, a limb, anything.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciated that they kind of tucked it away as much as possible, so you can have that interpretation of what this game really is about. But I'm sure you and I both know people that love to 100% games. So if there are people out there that want to do that, it's there too. And to really see the story. But yeah, I agree. Like, it is important. I feel like the way that they crafted this game and this story, that everyone has a moment to be Gris, right? Like to feel what she feels. And like you said, the point of her having this moment where they reveal where they add extra context to it does cheapen the game. But like the fact that you can have that moment without that is, I think, great.
Well, I don't want to nitpick you. I don't know that cheapen is maybe the right word that I would use, even though I don't like it personally. I don't know that I would say it cheapens it so much as it maybe puts it in too much of a spotlight. Maybe, I'm not sure. Perhaps cheapen is a fine word.
Like it just, I mean, like again, it was just very much more on the nose about what the story is about. I don't mean to say it in a derogatory way. I just mean to say like it's just like, it is one of those sections or moments where you're like, okay, well, this is how it is. And like, this is a story, like this is the definitive answer to that question.
How about this? It guides conversations, and by virtue of that, closes off conversations it could have otherwise been.
Yes, that's fair.
It's now about the loss of somebody. It's now no longer the loss of yourself, fertility, a part of your identity. It guides you into a path, and for some people that might be what they need and what they want. So who are we?
I mean, what's one, like an example of other media, like apparently the end of Sopranos, like a lot of people were pissed off about it.
Oh man, you're talking to the right guy. Did you know that I'm like a super fan of that show?
I think during our recording you mentioned it, so that's why I was
that's right, I did.
And so I mean, that left a lot of things open to interpretation, but like a lot of people wanted that definitive ending, like what happened, and it was frustrating for them for that. So like, I don't know. It depends on who you're talking to, who your audience is, but
yeah, that's an excellent example. That's an excellent example where keeping things unexplained, I think, elevates that ending to masterpiece. I think it's a beautiful ending. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to say it. I was going to
freaking Dexter.
I was going to say what I think happens, but then I was like, I don't want to spoil somebody if they haven't seen that show.
I mean, the show's been dead and gone for, years at this point.
Oh, get out of
like 20 years.
Get out of town. Get out of town. I don't like that argument. Come on.
No,
now.
no. Okay. Fine.
I'm
right,
kidding.
well,
I'm not. Hey, come
you don't
on
have
now.
to. You don't have to spoil it for the people that haven't. I mean, look, I haven't watched it, but I know the ending.
We're friends here. Besides, David Chase, the director, has like accidentally come out and said what happens, and he got mad about it. He was like, sure, okay, maybe that's what I think happens, but so what? Who cares what I think? What do you think? That's the point. What I think doesn't matter. He's like,
Exactly. I agree. And again, like that's a perfect example of like him putting something out there and people taking it and putting their own spin. They're taking and co-creating what happens at the end. So what if he says what happens? So what if he says, and he says exactly what we're talking about. Like, who cares?
Death of
he
the
said
author.
one thing, but if you want to have your own interpretation of what happened, that's cool too.
I want to talk about a prominent character in Gris here. The only other character that's not you or your mother / the statue.
Yeah.
What I have variously at different times referred to in this as the Black Mass, the Black Monster, the Shadow. We're introduced to it as a sort of facsimile of ourself first, as a literal shadow, and it eventually grows into this amorphous blob that can be an eel, a crow, and towards the end, a reflection of you yourself. And I'm curious to hear what your take on this is.
I mean, for me, it was just more about that I don't know if it's like self-doubt, but it's more like what wants to keep Gris down in the depths and stay depressed and stay in this like area where she can really spiral down in her emotions and her feelings and not, continue to live. That's my interpretation. I don't know what you thought about it, but
no, I think that's totally valid. It's that self-doubt, that fear born of desperation. It's grief. It's depression itself. It's that part of you that is afraid to move on, that inability to heal because you're afraid of the unknown. You're afraid of what acceptance truly means. This is a manifestation of that. It at various times will attack you. It tries to hinder your progress, which, by the way, like, that's something to mention. This game isn't linear in terms of like top to bottom. You are constantly ebbing and flowing, like rising and then falling even lower than you were before. Much like standard grief cycles, I think, if there even is such a thing. But this black mass, this shadow of you, is perpetually trying to fight you away. And what I love about this, I look at this as sort of representing, grief and depression. David Foster Wallace, what I mentioned Infinite Jest before, refers to depression as nausea of the cells and the soul, which I think is just a beautiful description of what this feels like. But what I love about this is at no point do you defeat this thing. Indeed, at the end, it kind of coexists with you, swallows you up, and you realize that you live with this thing now. And that is maybe the most profound thing that Gris has to say, I think, is that no matter how far along you get in the healing process, that grief, that depression, those feelings of inadequacy and fear and anguish, you don't defeat them. They are a part of who you are, and you need to accept them, to live with them, to grow. I think, media, and I'm going to be honest, I don't have anything in mind that I'm thinking of, but, I feel like there's a tendency with like more juvenile writers to frame this as a hero story where you vanquish the dragon of depression, with a mighty sword, and then you live happily ever after. Maybe you even get the girl. But that's not reality. That's harmful to think that you can just conquer this stuff. It's a part of who you are, and you need to be able to look at yourself in the mirror and say, I can't run from me. I cannot vanquish that which I am. This is a part of me, and I can live with it, but I cannot expel it. I don't know if that rings true to you, man, but that I've lost family members in the past. I've lost friends. I've lost a lot, and that grieving never goes away. It's always there, and sometimes it hits right up against you perfectly, such that you get sad about it all over again. But it gets easier to manage and live with time.
Yeah, I mean, another, as you're explaining that, I was like, oh wow, like, because now my life is about, because of my kids, like Pixar movies, watching Inside Out. Like that was, I feel like one of the themes of that movie, where it was all about, where it was again all about like the joy and stuff like that, and then sadness creeps in, and Joy does her best. I'm spoiling this movie, I'm sorry, but but like Joy does her best to keep the character, and I don't even remember her name, from dealing with sadness. But like to your point, she, like, sadness is part of who she is, and a part of growth, right? Like part of growth as a human being, as a person, is to deal with all the emotions, and knowing that I am not just happy all the time. I'm not sad all the time. I am me. I am who, and this is all part of it. And it's just, it is, this does it in such a different way, like a different way. There's obviously not many jokes and stuff like that here, but I feel like they both kind of run parallel to this kind of this theme and what they're trying to get across here.
Not just accepting to live with them, but accepting that expelling them is not the point. You can't do it. It's said, some people say you true love is loving somebody in spite of their faults. It's looking at that and saying, I love you regardless. That is part of who you are. I accept that. I don't I don't like when people try to change for others, okay, to an extent. I don't want to, that's a whole different conversation. That's you all know what I mean, right? I hope. But yeah, I think that's a really brilliant touch, that you don't defeat this thing. And, at the end, in case you maybe weren't catching on to what this black monster represents, at the end, it does turn into you, like a giant version of your face, before knocking you down one last time. It explicitly shows you, like, this is you, I am you, and I am a part of you. I will forever be a part of you. But what does Gris do? Gris heals regardless. She gets her voice back and continues to sing, and reunites with, the statue, which we can say, the memory of her mother, the acceptance of the life that she lost, if we're taking that interpretation, however you would like to spin your own analysis of this. Gris heals despite now living with this thing that represents some of the worst times of her life.
Yeah. I think it just wraps up in a very beautiful way, that you do want that kind of growth as a person, not just for the character, but for yourself, and like not kind of think that everything's going to be all right. But like, even when the going gets tough, you've got to understand that you have to process those things in a as healthy way as possible. But you have to go through it.
I know we kind of skipped over a lot, and there might be some listeners that are upset about that. This episode was never about beat by beat. It was about the conversations that come out of it, which is really how I'm trying to move the show forward, to be less about summarizing the game and more about creating a discussion around it. That's the co-creation, right? But one part of the game that we missed over is, as you're bringing more color into the world, you're meeting the statue, you're seeing more of the statue each time, you're letting new colors come in. At the final time, when you get the final color and you get your voice back, the statue opens its eyes for the first time, and it's this really beautiful moment. Well, actually, at first, Gris tries to sing and she fails. She's still maybe holding on to that fear of allowing herself to heal, that fear of the unknown that comes with healing. But it's such a beautiful moment of when the statue looks at you and the music is swelling, and it's the first time that you think, things are gonna be okay. And of course, there's still a mountain to climb at the end, but it's just such a beautiful, beautiful moment of hope.
Yeah, I agree. Like, you know, I feel like from what I've understood from other very prominent writers and from like screenwriting and like storytelling, you have to make your characters suffer. And I feel like they did a good job of making Gris suffer throughout this, and to then finally, even at that moment where, like you said, you can't really sing, and then you finally do, it's cathartic in a way. Like, oh, finally, like she has that respite, that moment of like, there is hope from all this pain and all this grief. And I totally agree with you. It was a beautiful moment to just kind of like see her kind of persevere through everything.
Made all the more intimate too, since it's her voice, right? You know, it wouldn't have the same gravitas and weight if, you know, Gris forgot how to play the violin and, oh, now she can play it again. You know, that might resonate with some people, but the voice is such an intimate thing that we all have. It's such a unique and personal part of who we are. It's our identity, really, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And like you kind of touched on earlier, especially with singing, like singing is, you know, it can be a very daunting thing, right? Like not everyone will sing, and especially in front of other people, it's usually like in the car or in the shower where you kind of like be yourself, and then to be able to express that with someone else is a very personal thing that is being shared, right? So
yeah. If anybody tells you that singing isn't personal, it's not intimate, ask them to sing in front of their coworkers. They'll change their tune real quick.
Yeah. I mean, some people have it and some people don't, and that's okay.
That is largely Gris. This is the journey to the end. The puzzles are a big part of this. You had mentioned that some of the puzzles towards the end tripped you up a little bit. I really like the puzzles towards the end, specifically the water levels where you're kind of playing with gravity, going like through, like from the air through the water down below the water, sort of actually, I mean, back to Celeste, sort of like you do in Celeste. I really, really liked some of these puzzles. There were a couple dealing with the lights at the very end that took me like a second, like I wasn't quite sure what to do. And then they do add the singing mechanic to make platforms bloom and flowers bloom a little late. And I could see how that might trip folks up. Which part of that was stumping you a little bit?
I think it was near the end where it was like, I guess a culmination of everything, which I usually appreciate in a game where you get a mechanic, you're introduced to it, and then you get tested. And then the next time you get a new mechanic and you get tested with that plus the original mechanic. And like how I generally do like that. It's just like, I don't know why near the end I was just like, okay, what do I need to do? Like, especially like, I guess getting like the timing of like kind of the platforming, especially with the gravity stuff, that kind of tripped me up. And, but like I did love, I felt like when you do figure out a puzzle in this game, there is that aha moment where you feel like you've accomplished something, if that makes sense.
And it seems to me that, you know, the game, it just knew when you had those, and the soundtrack would always punctuate with a new instrument coming in, just whenever you in your own brain said, oh yeah, I know now.
Yeah. It's just crazy how they were able to design that in that way. And yeah, very cool stuff.
Yeah, it's a really special game. And you had mentioned a couple times that it's very short. I cleared this in like 3.5 hours, I think.
Yeah, I think it's probably about the same.
I was refreshing my memory using a Let's Play, like a 100% somebody did everything Let's Play, and it was still under 2.5 hours. So it's definitely a game that doesn't take too much of your time, but it has a lot to say, you know, per capita. If we're measuring it that horrid way, it says a lot in its short runtime. And I don't know about you. I give this a hearty recommendation. I think this is worth your time.
Yeah, I would definitely agree to that, because again, we're not telling you to invest a lot of time into this game. There really isn't. And I think like on Steam, it's like relatively cheap compared to a lot of games out there. And, you know, I think if you're looking for a game that pulls on your emotions a bit, this is definitely one of those games. I think that, you know, every once in a while you do need a game that makes you feel bad a little bit. I think that's what I've learned as well, because I've always like, for me, gaming is always a place for me to escape, for me to not deal with reality as it is right now, and put a smile on my face. And this doesn't put a smile on your face in that way, or rather, it does put a smile on your face in one way, but it doesn't, because it does make you kind of reflect on kind of the emotions that you may have to face when dealing with these kind of, you know, emotional pitfalls, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word to use.
Yeah. It's not going to make you smile a minute, but it's It's nourishing. And even if you are so lucky to have never lost somebody or have gone through this grief process, you can still extrapolate from that, you know, what it means and how it looks to proceed through healing. So whenever you do look at this disastrous state of affairs that we're in the world, you can see that healing is not a linear path, and the first step is allowing yourself to go through the trenches of feeling that nausea of the cells and the soul, that soul-sucking sadness and grief. But that is a key and component part of making it through to ultimate healing and acceptance. And you might have to, you know, extrapolate it a bit further if we're talking about current political events. I understand this, but but there is something in here that can teach you about what it means to go through the human condition. And that's as valuable as you can be. If that's journalism bait, if that's journalist bait, then, you know, whatever. I guess, you know, I guess I should just play Black Myth Wukong and Call of Duty all day. What do I know? It's good, man. It teaches you about life. It's good.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. Like, it's a game that allows you to process maybe some feelings about loss. And maybe not in the same way that you do, but like at least you understand this is how this person did. And maybe that allows you to reflect on your the way that you process things and be like, oh wow, did I actually understand, like, is this how I should be processing things? I don't know. I'm just talking out of my ass here, but like, no, that's what I'm trying to say.
No, I know what you mean. You're right on the money. Absolutely. Thank you for joining me, man. This was a lot of fun. I'm glad that you agreed to come on the show for the first time.
Yeah, no, I mean, when I saw you looking for guests, I was like, look, I got to get on Rick's show. I might make a fool of myself, but you know what? I gotta do it. And I'm so glad we got an opportunity to do this. And I'm glad we were able to get you on our show and talk about Oblivion. So that was fun too.
Yeah. No, I don't think that you made a fool of yourself, but I do think that going through uncomfortable situations is part of change and growth. And if that's how you view this, then, you know, I'm glad I could be a part of it. I don't think that anybody is going to tell you that you embarrassed yourself. So please calm yourself of those, steal yourself of those worries.
Please put those in the comments, please.
Oh yeah. Yeah. If you want to make Chris feel bad, join the Discord. Don't do that. Do join the Discord. Don't make Chris feel bad. Chris, I appreciate you for joining me. As you alluded to, I have been on your show, which necessitates the existence of your show. You have one. Yeah. It's called 1 Hour, 1 Decision. I keep adding One Direction in the title by mistake. I don't know why I keep doing that. I'm regressing in my years.
I guess you could say that there is directions there, but yeah.
I guess you could say we're the boy band of podcasts.
Yeah.
So you are one half of the duo with your co-host Tom, 1 Hour, 1 Decision. And for folks that don't know about your show, I would love for you to tell them about it. And if you can, recommend a good first episode for them.
Again, thank you so much for having me on the show. 1 Hour, 1 Decision is a podcast that Tom and I have been doing for, I think this might be the 4th year. But We've been doing it now for quite some time, and what we do is we play a random game on Xbox Game Pass for an hour and decide if it's worth playing past that hour or not. We are at, I think, over 230 episodes at this point of mostly random games. I will put a caveat there, because sometimes games are picked by guests that come on the show, or if we ever do polls and stuff like that, that happens too. So, Tom and I have also grabbed the wheel, so to speak, and randomly picked games that we definitely wanted to try. So there's that. But yeah, we've been doing this for a while. Our podcast, we're on Spotify and all that stuff. I will send you the link tree. So, if you want to check out any of our stuff, please do.
1 Hour, One Decision. That is a podcast with a hook. You can find that in the episode description. You'll find their link tree and links to all of their stuff where you can check them out on the web. In the episode description, you can also find links to Pixel Project Radio stuff around the web. You can join the free Discord server if you're so inclined. It's a fun place to hang out. You can check out the Patreon if you're even more inclined. You can also check out our Blue Sky, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube presence. You can follow us at all of those places, some more active than others, but all of them are up and running. And of course, if you're so inclined as well, I should stop saying that phrase. If you would like, you can rate and review on whatever podcast app you like to use, Spotify, Podcast Addict, whatever. It's all appreciated, though. It helps get us into Al Gore's rhythm, and that gets us discovered by new folks. So, listeners, thank you for sticking around to the end. I hope this was enriching, and I hope to continue this. I know I say this every time. This podcast isn't a period. It's a semicolon or a comma, if anything. I want to invite new conversation into the Discord server or on Blue Sky. By all means, let's start a dialogue about this. So thank you for sticking around. Chris, thank you for coming on and talking about Gris with me. It was a real pleasure, and I hope folks check out your show. Again, find that in the episode description. And with that, we are about done. We are closing the journey on Gris. My name is Rick. I am your host, and we're signing off for now. Catch you next time. Take care.